evening, colleagues. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. I'm not sure what time it is where you are, but I want to welcome you. Welcome once again to the fifth installment of our African Interaction webinars. We are proud to have you, and we are proud to have gone this far to the fifth. We have one more webinar left for this year, which will be in December. So I'd like to welcome you, all of you. I would like to welcome colleagues from the University of KwaZulu-Natal, from UNESWA, from the National University of Lesotho, from Kenyatta University, and from other many universities, which I may not, I may waste the whole afternoon trying to remember all of them. But welcome, colleagues, wherever you are. We thank you for choosing to be with us this evening. We are going to have an interesting presentation today on research design, but I'm going to give this opportunity to Dr. Njia to introduce our guest speaker today. So over to you, Dr. Njia. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, the director of the program. It's a pleasure to be here once more. And I'm happy that Kenyatta University, we are still part and parcel of these interactive webinar series, and we are happy to participate. Yeah, so my duty today is quite easy. It's to present our guest speaker for today. And so I will do so dutifully. So Professor Molebatsi Nkoane is a research devotee in the Faculty of Humanities, Department of Postgraduate Studies in Education. He has served as a former Dean, Research and Internationalization, as a former Director of Research and Postgraduate Studies, and as a former Head of Department in the Social Sciences Studies, Education and Higher Education. Professor Newton has also worked at a number of universities. There is Vista University, Bloemfontein campus, University of Durban, Westview, University of KwaZulu-Natal, the NATO Edgewood campus, University of Zululand at Kwandalengzwa campus. He has also worked at the University of Free State, Bloemfontein campus, and Seton Hall University, New Jersey in the USA. His research work focuses on how to create sustainable learning environments, and it is aimed at improving pedagogic praxis and contributing to theory with the intention of optimizing educational opportunities and conditions for learning. His work is situated within the discourses of social justice and critical emancipatory paradigm, advocating for resolving problems of poverty and marginalization as these challenges impede optimal learning. He has quite some successful experience in academic supervision, and he has graduated over 40 master students and over 36 doctorate students. He is widely published in numerous journals, both local and international, and he has also book chapters into his credit, and he has also been an editor of journals and academic books. So as you can see, members, we have got somebody with rich experience, and we are privileged that he has found it fit to share with us so that at least we can get to get a share of the knowledge that he has garnered over the years. So Professor Molebatsi, welcome, and I think the floor is now yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, colleagues. I hope you can hear me, and I hope you can also see the screen that is shared. I was trying very hard to open the camera so that people can see my face, but because of maybe age, I'm struggling a bit, but I'll sort that out later. Let me talk as I was given an opportunity to come and then share with colleagues the research design. And my talk, I want to move to the next slide. I don't know whether, yes. On my next slide, I'm sharing what you call the great illusion or Herman effects. This is more of the visual phenomenon called the Troxlexer fading. When you try to look at those dots, some black dots starts disappearing. And on the title of that slide, I wrote research as a way of understanding the world. And you can see that the way I write the research is quite a little bit awkward. It's awkward in the sense that I hyphenated the word research. When your side is fixed on a certain point, a visual stimuli in your peripheral vision will fade away and disappear after a few seconds when you are trying to locate the black dot. This is because of an influence of light that is scattered into the shadow region. This is also about our capacity to perceive the lightness and reflectance. So I thought maybe I should start there to share this with you in trying to begin to engage with a research. And then perhaps maybe I should start unpacking why do I write research, hyphenating it. Because for my own understanding, when you do the searching or an investigation, you do it in two folds. The first part, you do it at a conceptual level, and then the second part, you do it at an empirical level. But maybe before I delve deep into that, let me just go back and then just touch on the stages of knowing, to say we're being influenced by discourses in terms of understanding how we make meaning and how knowledge is constructed. We know the conventional way of doing research, or the traditional research that dates back to the 1900s to the 1950s, which is heavily influenced by the positivistic stage. And it's also heavily influenced by the natural sciences, where we talk about samples. We also refer to participants as subjects. We know researchers from the traditional viewpoint as people who are omniscient, meaning that they have infinite knowledge. We know researchers to also to be omnipotent, having powers beyond the imagination. Researchers could produce absolute truth according to the conventional practices, adhering to the principles of the quantitative paradigms, and then also issues around the validity, the reliability, predictions, objectivity, and verification, etc. So the point that I'm trying to demonstrate as we do this presentation is how knowledge is not solidified and how knowledge has been changing from one set to the other. And then we know from the 1950s to the 1970s that we moved to what we call the modernist stage. And then later on and beyond, it was the postmodern stage, where there were contestations and people were critiquing the quantitative ways of doing research as a singular way of doing the research and looking and understanding the world. There are different approaches. I'm not going to touch all of them. We know the transformational approach. There are different and various new ways of interpreting also the qualitative research that will include the phenomenological stage or the narrative way of doing this study. Other scholars, then they came up and then also came up with what we call the structuralist. And then later was the structuralist faded as people were beginning to talk about the post-structuralism. And then every time when I'm talking about structuralism and post-structuralism, I always ask this question to say, what makes the difference between us as humans and then the trees or shrubs or flowers or any other plant? Is there any difference between human beings and these organs? According to the post-structuralists, there is no difference. There is no difference because if you take the same plant and then you break that plant into minute element compounds, then you'll see that every element that you get in a tree or in a plant, you'll also get that element in a human being. And then later on, this was not the end. I mean, people have been progressing and then changing. We have seen, people started using and then using action research, and then action research, which is a broader way of doing research. And then within action research, you got what you call action learning, you got what we call lifelong action learning. We got what we call action research, you got action learning and action research, you got participatory action research, you got participatory action research, and many others. I'm not going to waste time on explaining those things. And then there are scholars now who are doing research, and then they are using what we call the bricolage. I mean, colleagues who are reading the works of Levi-Strauss and other scholars like Norman Denzel, they will know the bricolage and then how do we use bricolage. The point that I'm trying to drive at today is knowledge is not solidified. Knowledge is unsolidified. Knowledge is in the state of flux. Knowledge is never fixed. Knowledge is never frozen. It is always ever changing. It depends where do you look at the knowledge, and then how do you interpret that knowledge, and then how do you make sense out of that particular knowledge. So let me come back to what I'm tasked for, and then what I initially titled as research, and then hyphenating it. The point that I was trying to drive at is when you do research, basically what you do the first part, which is the conceptual part, and then on the conceptual part, you are theorizing about the searching. You'll be writing your research questions, you'll be writing the research aim, you'll be writing your objectives, or you'll hypothesize. And then all these, you do it at a conceptual or a theoretical level. And then usually this will stem from the background of the study, which is about your own motivation as a researcher. What is that motivates you? What are your experiences? And then other points that also influence your research study is, and which we call it the springboard, is what we call it the research problem. That's where you start. You start first by giving the readership the problem. What is the problem that you want to investigate? And then out of that problem, then you can work towards, crafting the title of your study. You can work towards crafting the aim of your study. You can also work and then begin to craft the research objectives. And then out of those research objectives, then it will be much more easier for you to begin to craft the research questions. And then those research questions will become like your steel rods that will put your study together, even those research objectives. And all these are connected. They are connected to the problem, they are connected to the study, to what we call the research problem. And on the conceptual part, also what you do what we call the review of the related literature. Even before you start, crafting the title of the study, as you are problematizing or conceptualizing your research, then you have to review the related literature. What is the literature says, and then how literature informs, and then also validate, corroborate my research problem. And then you'll move again to the next stage, which is about the framing of your study, which will inform how then are you going to do the literature. How are you going to review the literature? You are using certain lenses or philosophical assumption to begin to understand your literature review. You come up with definitions of operational concepts. Even when you are defining these concepts, you are still conceptualizing and theorizing that, because usually people will define operational concepts from either the encyclopedic position, define it from the dictionary position, define it from the technical literature, and then all these after defining this, then you see how then they connect to the objectives of your study, or what we call the research questions. And then you'll further develop what we call the constructs. And constructs are developed and derived from the theme, and those themes are guided by your research objectives and your research questions. So I was tasked today also to look at the research design. The research design for me still falls within the first part of doing a search, which is a conceptual stage, where you'll have to define and then craft your blueprint very neatly to say what kind of a research a design my study is going to adopt, and then what are the pros and cons of that, how am I going to use it, what it is, and then you also need to provide a very strong justification and rationale for the choice of the design that you are going to use in your study. Then we move to the second part of the searching, which is the empirical or the practical searching, what we call the operational searching. That's where then you bring the methodology, you are discussing who are going to be your core researchers or the participants. Other people will call them the subjects of the study. What kind of instrumentations are you going to do, to use to collate and then collect the data? What are the ethical protocols that you have to follow? How are you going to analyze the data? And then how you are going to interpret the data? And then lastly, on the operational stage, then that's where you provide the findings. So that part forms the part of the empirical stage. Let me move to this part, which I call it either a thesis or a dissertation. I'm using the analogy of the menorah. Others, they call it Hanukkah. This, for me, represents the thesis of the study. And then if you look at those candle holders, they are intertwined, they are tangled together. And then for me, to make sense and then also connect this menorah or Hanukkah to your thesis or your dissertation. Usually for people who are following what is this religion? The Jewish religion, before they start with the proceedings, they always light the candle. And then the first candle that they light is that candle that is in the middle that has the question marks. We call it the working candle. You start with that particular candle, and then you go to the candle that is a title, chapter 1. You light that one after lighting the middle candle. And then after lighting number 1, you must light number 6. And then after lighting number 6, you must light number 2. And then after number 2, you must light number 5, number 3, and number 4. For me, this represents and then shows how we do the research and then how we write our thesis and dissertation. Usually we start from there in the middle, and then we go to the first chapter. In the first chapter, what is that you are doing? You are trying to provide the readership with an overview of the study. That's where you'll be stating the significance of your study. You'll be stating the problem statement. You'll be stating the objectives of your study. You'll be indicating the research questions. You provide a brief literature review that is going to inform your study. And then you also provide some methodological approaches that you'll be adopting in your study. You give an overview. Other people will say you give the readership a bird's-eye view of what your study is all about. And then after doing that, this chapter number 1 has to correlate and then connect with the last chapter. In the last chapter, that's where you have to provide your findings, because initially you indicated what was the problem. Then you'll have to tell the readership how the problem was resolved, how did you make meaning of that problem, how the objectives were addressed, what the findings are, and all these are connected to what was in chapter 1. And then if you look at the second, or what is titled chapter number 2, usually what is in chapter number 2 is your other people will just separate that and then dedicate that to theoretical framing. Others will just collapse the two, the theoretical framing with the review of the literature. And then if you see that chapter, it is connected with chapter 5. Chapter 5, that's where you are presenting the results of your study. And these are connected with what was presented in the literature. And then what is that guides your literature study is those themes, and where does these themes come from? These themes usually originate from the objectives of your study and your research questions. So what is in chapter 2 will also connect with the presentation and analysis of the data, which is on chapter number 5. And then on chapter number 3, that's where you provide the research methodology or research design and methodology. And then you see that chapter is also connected, according to this menorah, is connected to chapter number 4. So in that chapter, that's where you are doing just pure presentation of data. And then when you are doing that, you link it with the methodologies that you indicated on your chapter 3. So you see the candle in the middle is missing the title. So maybe I might, pause here and then ask the question, what do you think that candle holder represents? Anyone who wants to respond to that? What will that middle candle holder represent in your thesis? Anybody?
Yes, Prof.
Yes.
Prof, I think it is.
Do we raise hands, Prof?
You are cutting.
Do we raise hands, Prof? I
yes,
think it represents.
You can do that.
Thank you. I think it represents the new knowledge that I'm going to come up with from this study.
Yes, new knowledge will always be there, New knowledge will be, as you are doing your literature review, you are not just reviewing the literature, you are reviewing the literature, but also demonstrating the gaps that are there. So new knowledge can not only be within that centerpiece. Who else wants to try? Anybody? Okay, let me proceed. Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you. Possible. I think it stands for maybe the proposal.
Yes, one will say the proposal, as I indicated. Proposal will be on the candle holder that is titled chapter 1. Remember your proposal, you convert that proposal into chapter number 1. After you completed the study, you even go back to that chapter and then say, this is an overview of the study. You give the details in terms of what your study is all about. So the proposal would be chapter, I need the centerpiece. Okay. What will the centerpiece represent?
Could I give a guess?
Yes, please.
Maybe could it be representing the problem that the study is seeking to address?
That problem will also be coined and then crafted and also be part of chapter 1. Remember, I said that becomes your springboard. The springboard, that's where you are writing the research problem or statement of the problem. That is part of chapter 1. Anybody, and then we can move on and then think maybe there was no candle. Anybody who wants to try? Okay, let me continue. That centerpiece represents you. It represents you as the researcher. It represents you as the author of the study. Remember, I said that's the very first candle that you light. That very first candle, you as the author, you'll be providing the context and details of every chapter. And then see how that candle is intertwined and tangled to each and every chapter, meaning your voice as the author of the study has to come out throughout the study. Whether you are providing or presenting or writing the first chapter, the voice of the author must come out very clear. Even when you are given definitions of operational concepts, which are the central concepts in your study, you might define them according to the technical literature, how technical literature define a particular concept in your study. But over and above that, you have to provide a definition that comes from you as the author, to say over and above all these definitions, whether it was encyclopedic, whether it was a dictionary meaning, whether it was a technical literature, but you want your readership to understand that particular concept from your own position. That's what that candle represents. Even if you move to the next chapter, which is the literature review, or you provide the theoretical framing or conceptual framing of your study, your voice as the author has to come very clear. Whether you are going to do the research design and methodology, you tell us about the paradigm, you tell us about what that paradigm is, and then how is that paradigm related, or you see it being relevant to your study. The last part that you have to do as you are explaining that paradigm, you have to provide the voice of the author, where you are justifying in terms of why the choice of that particular paradigm. Whether you move to the analysis, your voice as the author will always come. Whether you go to the presentation of data, you'll be presenting that this is what the participants are saying. But then your voice has to come in there. Even when you are doing your final chapter, your voice always has to come. So that was a way of, just trying to use this analogy of menorah or Hanukkah, demonstrating how this connects with your thesis or your dissertation. Another issue that I also want to ask is, as we're writing our pieces, our intellectual pieces, what is that we're trying to do? Are we trying to tell the truth? Are we trying to tell nothing else but the truth? That's the question that I'm asking. What is that we're trying to do? Maybe somebody might want to respond to this. Are we trying to tell the truth and the absolute truth? Why are we doing the study besides getting a piece of paper called a qualification?
Hello?
Yes, I can hear you, David.
Yes, it's not
Is it
David.
David or it's Mafata? Yes.
Yes, we are trying to understand the issues, the things as they happen.
Yes.
Although we may not the reality, the true truth here, we also want to maybe to get, we want to work towards what might take us closer to truth.
Okay, meaning you're not going to tell the truth, but something very close to. I hear you.
Yeah.
You don't have to respond. Let's hear what that Nkoane is saying. David, you can unmute.
Yes, Prof. I think the truth, yes, but subjective truth. The truth that is my truth, the truth in my own perspective, because my own perspective, because what might be true to me might not necessarily be true to you or the other scholar or researcher. It is
Okay,
true in that
yes.
sense. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nkoane. I think I was deliberately switching my video camera off because I'm very emotional, most especially when people start engaging. I tear very easily. So as you are responding to this, tears are beginning to gather in my eyes. But I think you nailed it. To say, as we're writing our intellectual pieces, we're not striving to tell the absolute truth. We will be giving the truth from our own perspectives. As I indicated earlier, to say knowledge is about knowledge construction is just in a state of flux. It depends on where you are sitting and which angle do you understand what is that you are investigating. So it's subjected to some interpretations. So that's the point that I'm trying to drive at, to say, as we're writing our piece, we're not trying to tell the absolute truth. Nothing is fixed. Everything is relative. It depends on how you see it. Knowledge is multiple. Knowledge is dynamic. Knowledge cannot be essentialized. Knowledge is, we create knowledge in what we call the regimes of truth, which is we created it within the discourses, within the interactions of relational conversations. Knowledge is about what is that we're imagining. As we're interacting and engaging with the participants, as we're engaging and then reading whatever literature. So we're beginning to imagine things. So knowledge is about imagining. Imagining is always colored by a different perspective. And the truth is not one thing, but it is an ever-increasing complexity, which is never finite, and can never be attained. And then research help and then also needs to always declare its biases. So that is why, as you will be choosing a particular research design, then you'll have to declare your biases in that. So the point that I'm trying to make, I'm going to ask Ndate to mute. Colleagues, can you mute? The point that I was trying to make is that there is no absolute truth. But we can talk about multiplicity of the truth. That's what we do as we are conducting our studies. I couldn't help but take photos of some vegetables in the house. And then I thought maybe this will also assist in trying to make sense of what we're talking about. So I came across an onion. And then for me, an onion represents what we're trying to do in research. The question is, how does an onion and research comes together? The question that I always ask is, if you unpeel or you peel the onion, what is that? The first layer as you remove, what is that you get? What is inside an onion? Maybe that's the question that I want to ask. What is inside an onion?
Hello?
Yes, I'm listening to you, Ndate Mafata.
Maybe minerals, nutrients?
Yes, nutrients are there.
Yes.
But I was looking at this particular, at the face value to say, as you unpeel it, what is that you get inside?
Okay. Let me come again. It provides, it has got some layers that look like shells.
Yes. So
Yes.
meaning if you peel the first layer, what you come across another layer.
That's
And then
true.
if you peel that other layer, you'll come across another layer until you get to nothing. So as we are doing and then trying to understand knowledge, that's what we do. We're just unpeeling, trying to arrive at the crux. We're trying to tell the truth, but the more we dig deeper, we find that there is actually no absolute truth. So that's that vegetable really helped me to understand. This particular slide is similar to the menorah that I presented earlier. If you see there in the center, it's just dividing what we call the conceptual stage on your left-hand side and the empirical, which is the a practical stage of doing research. So when we are saying we are researching and then hyphenating that research, meaning we are doing the first search and then at the conceptual level or the theoretical level, and then we'll be doing the second search at the practical level. And then I've highlighted that to say you'll be doing your literature review. That is more conceptual, it's more theoretical in orientation. And your title of the study, it also emanates from the research problem that you provided. And then that research comes from the conceptual part, because as you are validating, as you are corroborating, as you are supporting what you have experienced, you do that at the theoretical level. Even when you are providing your hypothesis, when you are providing your research questions, you do everything at the theoretical level. Whether you'll be providing the theory, whether you'll be providing the conceptual framing, that you do it at the conceptual level. And then when you come to the extreme right, that's where then you collate your data, you do your data analysis, you interact with your participants, everything becomes practical. So some of the design, you see the design was supposed to be on the borderline there, because you can do it at a conceptual level. You understand this will detect that you do it at the practical level, depending what design do you choose to inform your study. Let me move on to how then do we begin to formulate the research design. Before we start with our intellectual pieces, there is a need that we put a plan together. And then this plan, the research design, becomes an overall strategy to integrate the different components of your study. And then as you do that, you always try and strive for coherence in what you are doing. You strive for logic. You strive for what they call it golden thread. This golden thread, as you are writing, you don't want to lose sight. I know people in KZN and people in South Africa, and even in Lesotho and everywhere else, they will always say, if people want to mark you as you are moving in town, they wait for you to see whether you are not focused. If you are not focused, then they will mark you and then take your belongings. In our own South African terms, we said ulathi side. If ulathi side, then they will deal with you. So as much as you are doing research, you have to stay focused. You develop that coherence. You develop that logic. You develop the golden thread, meaning your aim of your study should connect with the objectives of your study, should connect with the research question, and this will help you to collect, generate the data. And this will also help you as you are doing your analysis and your findings. When you are looking at your analysis, you are checking whether when you are analyzing the data, does this talk to what you initially put as your research questions. So research design is very important because it will help you to have that kind of coherence, logic, and golden thread. And then the next part, which is very important in this, putting the blueprint together, which is your plan together. When you are putting your research design, you have to respond to these three important questions. When you are doing your research design and methodology, throughout whatever section you are tackling, you are responding to these three most important questions. That is the what question, that is the how question, and then that is also the why question. How does that make sense? If you will be giving us to say the research design that my study adopts is, or my research study will be located within a qualitative or a quantitative research design. You are not writing for your supervisor, you are writing for the broader readership. So you have to take the readership by the hand and then try to explain to the readership as to what is a qualitative research design. You also have to tell the readership how are you going to use that particular design. You also have to provide what we call justification. That justification, then you'll be explaining to say, why are you using that particular design? Whether you choose a particular paradigm, you'll be doing the same. Whether you'll be talking about the research methodology, you'll also be responding to these three questions. What is it? How are you going to use it? And then why do you decide on that particular choice? That's how you do it. And then research design also informs both the readership and the researcher on how data will be collected, how data will be collated, how data will be generated. I'm using two terms about collecting the data and generating the data, because this depends on the approach or method that you are using to collect or generate the data. People within the participator or action research that don't collect the data, but they generate the data. And then your research design also will help to respond to the question, how will you measure that particular data that you have collected? So research design also helps us as the readership, and then helps you as the author or the researcher also to inform as to how you are going to analyze that particular data. Let me move to another section about the structure of the research design. How does it help us? It helps us because it will specify a type of scientific evidence to test the theory. What does that mean? Remember when I was talking about the research problem, I said even if that emanates or comes from your own experiences, you always have to validate that with scientific evidence. Scientific evidence will be, as you are reviewing the literature, just to corroborate and validate the argument that you are making. And then the structure of the research designs will always also indicate whether you want to evaluate a particular program. The choice that you make of a research design will also even help you to specify if you intend to just basically describe the phenomenon, because there are different research designs that one can follow. So I'll be talking about these different research designs. Let me just quickly reflect on how does this informs us, the sound research design. Sound research designs help us to identify the research problem. What is the research problem? It will give us that very clearly, because it informs the researcher, also informs the readership to say, what is that is investigated? And then another point is the research design also justify in terms of the choice of the design. Why did you choose that particular, your selection? Why the choice of that particular research design over others? So you'll always have to justify that. And then your research design also helps in terms of how then you're going to review the literature. Because there will be one research design that I'll be talking about later, which is what we call the philosophical research design. Philosophical research design helps us in understanding the kind of literature that we are reading, and then what is that we are reading, what is that we're trying to tell the readership, and then how does that also help you to make an understanding of what you are doing. And usually we do this at 3 levels. We do it at the ontological level, we do it at the epistemological level, we also do it at what we call the axiological level. These are philosophical assumptions that informs as to how we do the literature. And then it does not end there. If you are going to adopt a particular conception or a particular theory that assists you and you use it as a lens to engage and then interrogate the literature, it does not end there. You will take that theory and take it to the other chapters when you will be doing the analysis. Because as soon as you are doing the analysis, you need those, that theory to help you to analyze the data. Research design also specify the research questions, helps you to specify the research questions or your hypothesis, because you'll be responding to what are the steel rods that put my study together. And then if we talk about the steel rods, what are we referring to? If you talk about the steel rods that puts your studies together, we're talking about those research questions that you ask. When you are doing your study, you are trying to respond to the research questions. And then those research questions, remember what I said earlier, I said, always stay focused. There must be logic, there must be coherence, and then this will make you to follow up your study. And then that becomes the steel rods of your study. And then your research questions, because you can turn those research questions and either tweak them and then craft them as themes of your study. And then you can even develop further. You develop what we call the constructs or intellectual elements that helps you to understand what is that you are doing. Research design also helps us to describe what data are we going to use, and then how data will be obtained. So if you are very clear in terms of this is the design that I chose, then in your design, you'll be in the position to help us as the readership and then help you as the researcher to say, how are you going to collect, generate the data? How are you going to obtain the data? And then also helps you, the research design will also help you in terms of the methods of analysis. That becomes very critical. I'm not going to touch in all kinds of research design because we have so many, but I'll be touching in few of them. Let me firstly touch on the first one that we call it action research design. And then if you look what is there in your slide, you have what we call the entry point. The entry point is where you are identifying the initial problem that you stated as the research question. That's where you start. And then you will go on after gathering and analyzing and investigating that problem, and then also supporting it with other scientific evidence. And then you'll go further and then do what you call the diagnosis of the real problem and its roots and causes, where you are pinpointing a key themes that needs to be underpinned and what is really going on. That's what you do as you are following the we call it the cyclical protocol of the action research. And then you'll provide the feedback to your co-researchers or your participants, where you are giving them feedback to say, hey, this is what now where we are. This is the kind of feedback and the things that we're getting. And then you give directions, and then together with your co-researchers, you can develop what we call an action plan. And then you think as to how then are we going to implement what we have investigated and then what we have identified, and then you put it in action. And then after that, you don't say you have achieved. You still have to wait and then evaluate and critically look at what is that has been put and then implemented. At times, it might not reach the desirable outcomes that you want to reach. So what you need to do, then you'll have to restart again, replan, and then follow that cyclical protocol of the action research. And then this is what the design looks like if you talk about the cyclical protocol of the action research. It always adopts a cyclical protocol. It explores the understanding of what the problem is. It helps you to plan the kind of what we call interventionary strategies to say, if this is the position, then how are we going to intervene? And then those interventional strategies, as you are putting them together, you are implementing them, then you follow that cyclical processes, and then that cyclical processes will be repeated. And then you continue until you understand what is that you are doing, and then until you have found the solution. And then that cyclical protocol is interactive in nature. It's not you who are just deciding on your on your own as the researcher, you work with others. And then you start with the conceptualization again. You start with what we call particularization of the problem. And after several interventions and evaluations, then you can come with the solution. Remember, this kind of action research is driven by the actual change. You want to change the status quo. And it is all about the collaboration. The design focuses on practical or pragmatic solutions that are driven by research. Or if you are adopting the action research design, you are driven by that. You are also learning in the process. You don't come to the space as an expert, but you come to the space as somebody who's also going to learn what is happening. And then there are other. Can I ask colleagues to please mute? There are no hidden controls or pre-emissions of directions if you are using this. This design does not go without complexities or intricacies. They are there. There are challenges, there are complexities if you are following the action research. And some of the complexities of using action research is it is harder if you have to compare that with conventional studies. Because focus, as I indicated earlier, is on change, to say you want to see change. And then when it comes to reportings and finding, there are no standard formats that are pre-given. And it is also very sophisticated, it's complex, and it's time-consuming. That's the first part that I also I wanted to highlight on. The second research design that one might also decide to follow is what we call the case study research design. Let's say, for example, there was a study that was done on academic performance. Academic performance includes so many variables. It might be how exams were constructed. It might be about questions that were constructed in that exam. And then if you are doing the case study, usually we're informed by a bigger study that is there, but you are zooming into a particular phenomenon. You are zooming into, you look at the results, but you want to look at a particular phenomenon. You might be also, if you are talking about academic performance, variable like conditions will also be an issue. About how the previous study was analyzed, that might be another issue. How data was collected, that might be another issue. So the point that I'm trying to make about the case study research design, this is an in-depth study of the research problem. But what it does, it helps you to narrow down, it helps you to zoom into a particular phenomenon. One or few researchable examples that you want. Maybe you want to see academic performance is not necessarily influenced by how examinations were constructed, but also by the teaching modalities that are there, pedagogic practices that are used. So maybe you want to zoom into case study research design. It also helps you. It's very useful if you want to test a particular or specific. Either you want to test or look at the model, you want to look at the framework, you want to look at a particular specific phenomenon. It helps you to understand very complex issues through detail by contextualizing the focus to say, this is where I'm going to zoom in. And then researchers who are using case studies usually can use what you call heterogeneous methods or approaches of doing the research. It usually uses eclectic mixes of research methodologies. It provides you are extending what was initially done, and then you try to zoom into a particular phenomenon, and then you focus on that particular, whether is it the research design, is it how examinations are conducted, is it how teaching is done, you zoom into a particular phenomenon. It gives details and then description of a specific and rare case, for example. But this also, it got its own intricacies, it got its own complexities. These are the small types of complexities that goes with case study design. Case study design is small in nature, might look at a single case of that offers some kind of a limitation. There is also a risk of being biased as you are beginning to interpret the data. A case study might also not be representative of a larger problem. And it becomes very difficult for you to begin to generalize the findings. So findings might apply to a particular focus. That's the second part of a research design. The next one is what we call a causal research design, where you are checking at the correlation, we're quoting the causalities that are there. It's about the cause and effect. For water to boil, what is that we need? Maybe we need fire, and then after putting the water on the fire, then we'll have the boiling water, or we'll have a steam. Another correlation that slide is trying to demonstrate is when the two things appear to be related. Like, for example, in summer, people, experience this problem of sunburn, right? And then also there is an increase in terms of how people consume ice creams, or the sales of ice creams goes up because of the hot summer temperatures. So we can see the correlation between the two to say if there is hot weather, and then people start, there is that kind of causality relationship. But this does not necessarily mean that all these are always related. So you have to be very careful in terms of, as you are using a causal research design. Causality studies may be understood as a phenomenon in terms of conditional statements in the form of if X, then Y. It measures an impact of a specific change on existing norms and then assumption. Also requires empirical association to reach whatever findings and conclusions that you are going to write, and requires time in order to conclude, to make and demonstrate that those causal relationship. And then it will help you to understand why the world works the way it does. That's another, but it has its own limitations. It has its own complexities. One of the complexities of using that is not all relations are causal. And there are possibilities of coincidence, to say maybe people might be eating ice cream not because they experience, or somebody, but because they want to eat ice cream. It is not easy to determine this kind of relationship that exists. And then other relationships or causalities that are there are inferred and can never be proven. At times, it is very difficult to tell whether one variable informs the other. I always ask my students to say, do you think maybe if we have to look back again to the academic performance, can we make a very convincing rationale to say because of Hurricane Milton in the US, that can also have an impact in academic performance of students in the SADC region? I don't think that is scientific. I don't think we can have a clear causality relation between the hurricane in the US and academic performance of students in KwaZulu-Natal or in Lesotho. Colleagues, let me move on to another a design. It's what we call descriptive research design. And this helps us in answering a couple of questions if you are going to adopt descriptive research design. And these are some of the questions that you can ask if you are using that. The first question is help us to understand who, also respond to the what question, when, and then how. Descriptive research design is used to obtain information concerning the status of the phenomenon. It describes what is that exists with variables in a particular situation. And then it is often utilized using the observational approaches or modalities if you are conducting your study. This is not all. I said that we have so many. Another one, research design that you might decide to choose is what we call the experimental research design, where you can have, I don't like the word subject, but you can have your participants in your study, and then you group them into 3 groups. The first group might be where you are going to give them a new drug. The second group might be you give them the old drug. And then the third group, you give them a treatment of what you call placebo. Placebo is when you give actually a fake drug, which has nothing. These people are having problems with headaches. So we want to test a new medication for treating migraine or headaches. So we can give them that new medication and then see how they react. We give them an old drug and then see how they react, but we don't tell them. We give the third group just sugar or something else. And then we see them how they react. Other people will even react differently, even if they are not given a drug. You give them just sugar, then say, hey, this medication is work best for me. So then if you are using experimental, then you can compare the results from the first group, the second group, and the third group in terms of how then they react. And then if we check the experimental research design, the researcher can control the situation. This design also allows you to respond to the following question. What causes something to occur? Why somebody who just took a fake drug behaves in a way that, say, after taking this, hey, I'm feeling much more better. And then this experimental research design also permits the researcher to identify what are the cause and effect between the variables. And then what are the complexities of using experimental research design? Experimental research design is very artificial, and the results may not be generalized to everybody. We cannot say everybody after taking the placebo treatment, then they will always feel better. We can't say that. And then artificial settings of the experiments alters also the behavior of people. People will respond differently because of the artificial setting. It is also very difficult to use experimental design in some of the qualitative research methodologies. So these are some of the research design that we have. I'm not going to go through all of them. We have so many. We have so many research design. We can even talk about we have what we call the exploration research design, which is appropriate when there are a few or no earlier studies that are conducted or that we can refer to. And then usually with the exploration study, what is that we do? We aim to gain an insight and then also familiarity in terms of a later investigation. We're just exploring so that the aim is to familiarize ourselves with the settings that we put forth getting also a broader picture in terms of new ideas, sorry, new assumptions, and then how do we determine whether the study is feasible? How can we refine some of the issues for more systematic investigation and give directions for future research? That's one. Another one is the what we call the observational design. I don't have those slides here, but I'm just reflecting. There are so many. Observational research design is where you can draw some conclusions by comparing the subject against a control group or cases. And then we have different types of observational research design. Either you have direct observation, or you have what you call indirect observation, where participants are not even aware that they are being observed. And it is usually flexible if you are using observational research design, where data can emerge and then rather than be pre-existing, and then allows also an in-depth kind of analysis. I want to draw your attention on this one, which I highlighted earlier, which is the philosophical research design, which cut across from the first chapter up to the last chapter. When you choose the philosophy, where is either you choose it from the theoretical position, or you choose it from the conceptual position. And then how does this help us? If we have a theory or a concept, that theory helps us in those levels. The first one, the first assumption is at an ontological level, where it helps us to understand the nature of reality. And then on the second level, it helps us to understand how knowledge is constructed. How do we obtain knowledge? And then how do we make sense out of knowledge? And then the third part is the axiological level. What kind of value does the theory brings? What kind of value does that concept that you have chosen to use as your lens in your study? How will it help you to understand the values and beliefs? And then this also helps you with your methodology in terms of what methodological position are you going to adopt? How is your study going to be couched within a particular methodological position? This philosophical assumptions plays a very major role. And then remember what I said earlier, to say if you choose the philosophical assumptions, it helps you. It helps you even with your literature review, because as you are reading and reviewing related literature, you are doing that by wearing particular lenses, and these lenses stems from the philosophical foundations. You are using this to understand what is that is happening. And then I came to this slides that you see, to say philosophy or philosophical research design help us to see what we want to see. If you look at the first picture and then you look at the people right there, you think these people are at the top, but if you look from a different angle, you see this is like a flat surface. Others is like a climbing the ladder. If you look on the picture on, or what you call it, the infographic on your right hand side, is either you can see a frog or you can see the head of a horse. It depends from which perspective are you looking at that. So that's what philosophy does, or philosophical assumption help us to do when you are looking at the literature, when you are analyzing the data, when you are writing and then being informed by the way we do things. And this philosophical research design It is broader. It is a broad approach to examine the research problem than the methodological approach. It also gives a deeper embedded philosophical analysis, and then also improves your argument as you are writing your intellectual pieces, because you'll be writing your intellectual pieces informed by this philosophy to say, this is how I see reality. This is how I understand knowledge to be constructed. This is the kind of value that my study will be bringing, emanating and then embedded within a particular philosophy, or a theory, or a concept. So philosophical research design uses tools that will help us as we are writing our intellectual pieces, with some kind of philosophical traditions, with the concepts, with theories, and then models. Usually, this is what I always tell students to do when they are writing this, to say, go back and then write, tell us about what that theory or concept that you are going to use as a frame in your study. How is it going to, what is it? That's the first part. And then what are the principles that informs it? What are the objectives that informs that particular philosophy? And then where does it come from? Then you will be demonstrating what we call the evolution of that particular. What was it before it is what it is now? And then this philosophical research design help us to give us some kind of tools in terms of providing the critical analysis, and then also providing a critical exploration, and then beginning to challenge the discourses that are there in terms of its relevance in logic, its relevance of evidence. How then do we discuss the rules of the existing discourses? And then this also provides some kind of tools, which I think I've highlighted. I've highlighted those tools, or the theoretical assumption or conceptual assumption, where you'll be saying this particular theory, it's an ontological position in terms of nature of reality is this. What is real and what is not real? In terms of the episteme, of the epistemology of knowledge, the nature of knowledge, it will help you to understand how knowledge is constructed. How can we be certain of what we know as we're doing our studies? And then the last part on that theology, what is this? Philosophical research design and the philosophical assumption is the axiology, which is about the study of value. What kind of value will this bring to the body of knowledge? What value does an individual or a group holds? And then why are they holding those values and beliefs? So that's why it's important to have this kind of philosophical assumptions. It guards its own pros, it guards its own cons also. One of the pros is it will inform your methodology. Not only the methodology, as I indicated earlier, it informs also your literature review. It informs also your analysis of the data. It helps you to gain a greater understanding of what is that you are doing. You begin to see the world from a different angle altogether. It helps you to refine some concepts, some theories, the modalities and modes of thoughts and discourses that are there. And the philosophy, philosophical research design also helps us in terms of how then do we refine the structure of reality, or what we call the metaphysics. What are the kind of complexities that are there? It guards its own complexities also. One of the complexities is analysis can be too abstract. It becomes too abstract and argumentative as you'll be doing your analysis, because you are using a particular theory. And then it also, you can find yourself deep into the jargon that is used, because it's subjected to the jargon of that particular theory. And there can also be some difficulties in moving from, the abstract thought to the actual application. Colleagues, I think I'll be finalizing my talk by just highlighting this. I'm not going to get into details. So remember, I said when you are writing this particular chapter, you make sure that you respond to those three questions. What is it? How are you going to use it? And why are you using that? So one of the demands of my invite to this talk was I should also be touching on the sampling techniques. There are many also, as much as the research designs. So when you choose a particular sampling technique, and this also goes to the kind of an approach, the kind of research modality that you adopt in your study. Other people and other methodologies and approaches, they don't even adhere to this natural science techniques of calling people samples or subjects. But others, then they will always push for those sampling techniques. And then you have to tell us to say, what is it? How is it going to be used in your study? And provide the rationale, justification for the choice over that particular sampling technique. And these are the sampling techniques that we have. I don't think they are restricted to this. We have non-probability sampling technique. We have probability sampling technique. We have the convenience sampling technique, judgment sampling technique, the quota, the snowballing, simple random sampling, systematic sampling, stratified sampling, cluster, whatever that you choose, you always have to provide justification. And you always have to tell the reader why that choice. That's what you have to do as you are doing that. Colleagues, let me pause there. And thus, I'm still saying, in whatever that you're going to do, always remember that you are not trying to tell the gospel truth. You are not telling the absolute truth, but knowledge depends on where you are standing and how you interpret that knowledge. As you look at those pictures, it's either you can see on the right-hand side the vase, or you can see two faces facing each other. On the right-hand side, you can see the vase in the middle, or you can see an old man and the old lady, or you look very closely and then try to interrogate that. Then you see, no, what's supposed to be the ear of an old man is actually a lady standing at the door. And what's supposed to be the eyebrows and eyes of the old man is actually a Mexican man playing the guitar. And then what is on the other side, which is supposed to be the eyebrows and eyes of the old lady, is actually a woman carrying something on the head. Colleagues, let me pause there, and thanks for the invite. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Prof. Thanks very much, Prof. This is Friday afternoon, and it already feels like a Tuesday morning in election. Thanks, Prof, for
Okay, thank you, Bob.
such an engaging presentation. I love these presentations because they disrupt our own personal assumptions about a lot of things. They challenge us and they make us revisit our own suppositions, really, about a whole lot of things, a lot of which we may have been taking for granted for a long time. And these sessions give us an opportunity to look back and revisit and reconsider maybe our long-held assumptions and beliefs, our own understanding of how we make knowledge our own being, and how we come to understand phenomena in general. Thank you, Prof, for such an engaging talk. Colleagues, particularly to those who found us on the way. Welcome once again to this session. And I'm going to allow colleagues to engage with Prof. If you have questions to raise or comments to make about this presentation, this is the time. Prof, I'm not able to see all the hands. I will not be able to do so. So you may engage colleagues as you see the hands on the screen, Prof. Colleagues, up to you. Any questions or
I'm
comments?
also not able to see the hands from this side, but I'll try something else.
There's Turo has the hand up. Turo.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Prof. Thank you for the insightful presentation you have just given us. And yes, it was engaging mentally. We really appreciate it. I have two questions, actually. The first one is on the action research, looking at the participatory action research, the cyclical protocol of the nature, the nature of it being cyclical. My question is, how do I ensure that my participants are engaged throughout the whole journey, from the beginning to the end? Because looking at this kind of design, I think it is possible to have maybe a large group at the beginning, and then probably due to fatigue, people might want to drop out of the study. Then how do I make sure I keep them excited about it and want them to engage? That's the first question. And then the second question I have was on the observational research design, which I didn't know before. I heard that there are two types. There's one that's direct observation and indirect observation. And my question is indirect observation ethical? I think I'd have a problem with somebody observing me without having requested for permission to observe me. And how can they even, report those results, because they wouldn't have asked me for permission to observe me? Those are the two questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Do we have another question? Prof, will you be able to take 2 or 3 before you give a response? Is that okay? Prof? Okay, Ketri, do you have a question? Please unmute. Oh, Ketri has just muted. I thought you had something to say. Okay, in the absence of another question, Prof, I think you may go ahead.
There's David, Doc. There's David.
Oh, sorry. Yes, David, go ahead, please.
Thank you for this opportunity. I've really enjoyed that presentation by Prof. I'm here as a supervisor at Kenyatta University, and I have some questions which I keep on getting from my supervisees. So kindly allow me to ask 2 questions. The first one is about quantitative data analysis software. 95% of our students, especially for my department, educational psychology, they use SPSS. And yet we know that there are so many other software available, including Stata, SAS, even Python and Excel. What is your take about other software being used for research? Because I know we want to be able to do something different. Why can't we also be able to use other avenues for data analysis? The second question is about the use of models or theories or frameworks at the point where the theoretical framework is being communicated. Now, which is the best format to use? Is it okay just to use theories? What happens if a student prefers models or frameworks? Maybe I could get some guidance on this. Thank you very much.
Colleagues, please pardon me. As I was trying to respond to the first question that were posed, then I experienced some instability in terms of my network. I was cut off, then I have to reconnect. I think the first colleague asked about how do we ensure that, you know, co-researchers, if you are using participatory action research, remains engaged. I think as we're indicating to say, this is much more cyclical kind of a thing. One of the first things that you do as you are using participatory action research, you need to engage with your co-researchers and then agree in terms of modalities, in terms of how you are going to work together throughout. That's the first part. And then other issues that also makes, you know, the co-researchers not to be fully participating in the study are issues around discursive practices. That you can detect even how people write, to say, referring to others as subjects or whatever. The issues of power, how do you begin to balance, you know, the pendulum in terms of power dynamics? Always need to tone down and then show these people to say they are actually the constructors of knowledge in what you are doing, and then respect them accordingly. I think the second question that was asked, it was about the observational research and its ethical protocols, to say how ethical is that? If somebody is going to observe you, but you not being aware that you observe, as I was referring to those unobtrusive way of doing this observational research. Either it's direct, you are sitting there and then observing people, and unobtrusive, people in psychology, they will always tell you to say they are sitting in a particular room and then observing either the client, as the client is doing certain, maybe is playing with whatever. Not to say the client is not conscious, but at times you are there doing the observation. You can always get the necessary ethical protocols to say, yes, you give the consent, but you are not going to be directly sitting with those people looking at you directly, because that's one of the problems with using, people begin to act because they are conscious that they are being observed. So if they give you consent to say, I'll be observing you, but then you're not going to announce when you'll be observing what. And coming to Prof's question about the use of theories, models, and frameworks, concepts, I don't think we should be very prescriptive in terms of what people or students should use as frames, because these are just tools that assist us in understanding and then bringing a more level of sophistication in what students will be doing. So, but we should also, maybe to some extent, most especially student at master's and PhD levels, they tend to fall into trap. One might once use, heterogeneous theories or eclectic mix of theories, and then it becomes very problematic in terms of then how you are going to use these theories in one study in trying to understand the phenomena that is under investigation. People can use theories, they can use models, they can use concept, they can use whatever. You don't have to be prescriptive. I think one of the questions that you asked, I don't know whether that is also prescriptive in your institution, to say people should be using one particular software in analyzing the data. But I think it would be ideal if people are using different instruments or softwares that are there that can enable them to analyze the data. That's my take on that. I don't think we should be very prescriptive in using a particular software. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Prof. Thanks a lot. Makuru?
Okay, Dr. Mtembu, may I add before the next question?
Okay, Prof.
Yeah, I think Prof has just indicated very well that other institutions do have some prescribed particular software where students are not paying. Therefore, it will make sense that they decide to use SPSS because of the license of their institution. But if there's no such, then students then should be encouraged to use other software for data analysis, because using this is like to say, I use Ceph instead of OMO, but they are all doing the same thing. Those who are in favor of OMO will always go for OMO. Those who are in favor of Ceph, they will go for Ceph. But what mostly it's happening in our institution is that our institution do usually have some licenses that we can use according to those software, because we don't want to buy them as students. So as a result, then it will then force them to go that route. And again, in terms of theory, Prof has indicated well that yes, using theory, there are studies that are using grounded theory that may not have necessarily a specific theory that is prescribing what things should happen, but they will generate a theory as part of their data, which is called grounded theory. So those are the points that I just wanted to add to what Prof has just indicated. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Prof. Okay, we'll move on. Dr. Nkoane?
Thank you so much, Doc. And thank you, Prof. Nkoane, for your very insightful presentation. I think you touched on the use of the language in terms of the philosophical underpinning that you'd be using as a researcher. So I think you talked about collecting data versus generating data. And I find this very interesting because I was sensitized by this by my former supervisor. But as a supervisor myself now, I'm struggling to find where I can actually refer to in terms of the language that I'm supposed to be using if I use a certain philosophical underpinning. So if we're talking about a different paradigm, if we're talking about quantitative versus qualitative, and the language that I'm supposed to be using, where can I refer to as a supervisor to actually guide my students well to say, this is the language that you're supposed to be using? If we're saying data generation, how do I convince them that this is exactly what we're supposed to be using versus data collection? And also if you're talking about this means versus this suggests, where do we get that reference so that we know that we are on the right track in terms of the language that we're supposed to be using? Thank you.
Dr. Nkoane, in responding to your question, usually when we choose a theory, remember I said theory or concept, I said we go deeper. We go deeper in trying to understand what the theory stands for, what is its principles, what are these objectives. We even go to the level of understanding what we call the rhetoric, which is the language that is used. For example, if you are going to choose a critical theory, critical theory stands for certain principles, issues of equity, issues of inclusion, issues of social justice. So that helps to say, if you talk about issues of equity, that will sharpen even the language that you will use in your reporting and in your writing. And because that particular theory, because it stands for this, even when I'm writing, then this is how I should be writing. You might be reading other literature that is related to your study, but they are using different rhetoric and different languages. But the lenses that you are wearing helps you to sharpen what is that you are using. I always make this kind of an example to say people following a particular religion, they have their own rhetoric, they have their own language as to and how they begin to see the world, and then how they make sense out of that world, and then how they communicate what they, or how do they make meaning of what they are saying. So there is a particular, you can tell when somebody is what we call Msalwana, when somebody is just a Christian, when somebody just attended Sunday school. You can also tell with the language when somebody is following a particular Islamic religion with the type of language they use, because these are lenses that helps us to understand and then also make a meaning of what we are doing. So rhetoric will always be informed by the theory of choice in terms of how people should be writing. Let me pause there, Prof. Makuma. Dr. Makuma.
Thanks, Prof. Do you have anybody else would like to maybe contribute to this question?
I wish to contribute, Dr. Mthembu.
Okay, Prof.
I just wish to give just an example that I think may help Dr. Nkoane, because Prof has already indicated, gave everyone all of us useful information about the language of research. So say we want to know the length of 10 tables. Then I decide then to go for quantitative approach in collecting this particular data of the length of tables that I want to know the length. So in other words, I'll just I'll take tape measure and then measure them straight away quantitatively. You see, I have an instrument there. I'm just measuring them. So I'm collecting or I'm gathering the data. So that data is being gathered or is being collected using the tape measure. But if I take the qualitative part of it, where I talk about experiences of people, I may not believe in the tape measure, because the tape measure does not have feelings of these individuals. Therefore, I will ask people who have experience in terms of dealing with these particular tables. So others will tell me that the length of this is 2 meters, or the length is 1,5. So my aim is not to know exactly the size of these tables, but is to interpret and understand how these individuals that are my participants interpreting the length of these tables. Therefore, I'm not collecting data, or I'm not gathering data, but I'm negotiating data. I'm generating the data, or I'm producing the data. So producing and generating data is coming from the subjective position where you engage people in order to produce or generate data. But quantitatively, you need an instrument. You just measure this. You are not worried about how these people interpret this. You just measure them using a certain instrument or a tape measure. So for students, then when they are struggling in terms of differentiating between the gathering, which is going with collection, and the generation, which is going with production, they will just have to think about this example where they have tables. They can measure the tables quantitatively, but they can also generate data from elders or participants who may participate and then generate data like that. Thank you. That was just my contribution.
Thanks, Prof. Thanks a lot. Colleagues, do we still have more questions or comments on Prof. Nkwane's presentation? Prof, do you see if there are any more hands? Please unmute, Prof.
I was saying from my side, I don't see any hand. I'm sure they have mercy on me.
Okay, thanks, Prof.
So maybe I'll also check on the chat box if maybe there are no other questions. But I think the one Hamsang was asking is, I think Prof. Becky responded to that, and then I don't know what Ngabisa what was asking there. The first part, I think the second part where Ngabisa is saying, Prof, does it affect the tools used to collect data? I'm not sure about the context of that question. Because the first part is talking about participatory action research. And usually when do we use participatory action research, then you will define as to how then data will be collated and or generated, as Prof. Becky is saying, to say as you are engaging with the co-researchers, what are you going to use? Other people, you can't use, you are not sitting there and asking people questions. This is participatory, you are working on, you want to change the status quo. So some of the things maybe that are not clear there, others are using what we call the FIA, which is a free interview attitude, a technique just to probe, to say, is that what you were saying? Is this how we can do it? And then people can come up very clearly in doing that. But I was not quite sure about what is the context of that and what the question says. The rest, there are no questions. But thanks very much, Prof. Mtembu. I think that's all from
Yeah. Okay.
from
Can
what
I?
I see. Prof. Becky Sanders.
Yes. I just wanted to add that thank you very much, Prof, for this informative presentation. I liked when you spoke about the center of the candle, where you have these different chapters, and then at the center you had this the self. So the self is always directing all these issues. So in doing what we are doing, then we produce whatever we produce. It's contaminated by our own ideologies. Therefore, in order to understand my study, you should also try to go deeper to understand my ideology of
Yes.
how I do things. For example, there's this guy who developed Chat GPT. His name is Sam Altman. So he's a Stanford University dropout. He was doing BSc there in computer science, but in his second year, he decided to say, no, I don't want to continue with this academic work. Why should I finish a degree if we are now circulating whatever we already have in the world database? Why can't we design something that will generate that? Because when you say you write an essay, you paraphrase, etc., you are paraphrasing something that is already there. So when then he was starting to challenge that, he was saying there's no new information in what we are doing, but what we are doing, we are manipulating what is there and put it in a new way, and then we call it the new knowledge, or we call it the truth. So then when he developed this tool, then ChatGPT, it's working according to his ideology of looking at things. Because, for example, if you ask ChatGPT to say, you can ask any question, it will respond, even if it gives you fake news. But because his ideology is that we do have something that will represent what we are doing in this world. Therefore, this tool then is capable of getting that knowledge that you are struggling with. If you have to write a thesis, ChatGPT can write that thesis, but what will be generated there, it may be fake news, because the tool is unable to say, I don't know, if you are talking about academic work. So his idea, then his ideology behind that tool is that it will give you something. So as a result, then institutions and then everyone is worried about that notion that ChatGPT will always give you something, even if it is false. Therefore, you need to verify it accordingly. So when we then do research, we produce what Prof has indicated, that yes, we may not necessarily have the absolute truth, but what we identify as the truth for our own survival may be enough at the level of our experiences. That's why then when we talk about master's students, we simply say they must understand and master the method. But for the PhD candidate, they should come up with something that is convincing to say it is new, although some will say it is not new, but it should be convincing enough that we can say it is new at a philosophical level. That's, I think, what I wanted to contribute with that. Prof, thank you for that. You really give us what will help us in our journeys.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Prof. Becky, and thanks to everybody.
Thanks a lot, colleagues. If we don't have any more questions or comments, I think I will hand over the program to Professor Tlalele to conclude for us. Thank you, Prof.
Thanks.
Yeah, colleagues, I didn't know that I was going to conclude, but anyway, I hope you can hear me.
Very clear.
Yeah, but I think in addition to what was said in terms of the guest presentation, I hope the students were treated to a lot of imaginations. So I hope they were challenged to the core. And I hope they will continue using that now to say what you see at face value might not necessarily be what you think it is. So you have to dig deeper and try to dig deeper. So some people say with research, you start with one question and you end up with many questions. That's why people in academia never stops. They continue going on and on until they, even when they are retired, they continue going on and on. Some people will even say, even in their deathbeds, they will still be trying to find what the truth is and not find it. We don't know whether they find it after afterlife. But thank you very much. I also was following the deliberations after the presentation. I think they were very engaging. And I know there are very brave students who would want to always have their voices heard. But it will be good if you also can also have their views on what was presented and what they think. What was presented presents a springboard from which you can look at your and then try and reflect on it. So those that are busy with research designs, I hope you've had a lot of assistance. If you are confused, that's a good thing because we supervisors, our job is to confuse you so that you can find your way out of that confusion. I hope we'll see. I saw there was at least 90 participants in this seminar, although the others have gone away. I hope that tomorrow we'll still have this number. And we'll have more and more presentations tomorrow. Sometimes we'll have 2 or 3 presentations, and it's not very good. Yeah, thank you very much, colleagues. If I were to say bye-bye, bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Prof. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay,
Thank
bye.
you.